welcome to your kids' school, BMR. We're glad you're here. Every year at this time, we have Jonathan Spelling from MEFA join us to do a financial aid seminar. We used to do this in the fall for seniors. And feedback from a parent, and it made complete sense. I wish I had this information as a junior, so that as I go visit colleges with my kid in the summer, I'm armed with this information to ask the questions, and it made complete sense to us. So because of feedback, we decided to do it in the spring for juniors, so that when you go to colleges, you can ask the questions that you care about and your kids may not be thinking about because it costs a lot of money. So welcome back. We're so happy for this partnership with you, and Jonathan's been here since I've been here. So I'm gonna let him take it away. We are taping this so that if you miss something, we'll get a copy of it and put it on our website, and you'll have access to it. And the great thing is you can pause, rewind, and pause again. Things you can't do to a human.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Yeah. Still there. Thank you, Peter. And good evening, everyone. As Peter mentioned, my name is Jonathan, and I'm with MEFA, the Mass Educational Financing Authority. I've been with MEFA for about a year now. Before that, I was with another organization that worked closely with families around college planning and financing. And before that, I worked in a financial aid office at a college. So hopefully I can lend some insight from my time on the other side of the desk. Let me just echo having the parents of juniors. We do a lot of these financing seminars. Most are with seniors and parents, and we're trying to push our schools to be more like this, because really I think it's this time that's valuable information. When you start exploring over the summer, you're making your college lists and you're going to those schools and you're asking the questions. So tonight's presentation about college financing, a little bit more about MEFA, who we are. Not-for-profit state authority. We were founded in 1982. Really, our mission is to help families plan, save, and pay for college. So we are the state sponsors of a number of college savings plans, the U Fund, which is the state 529 plan, as well as the U Plan, which is the prepaid tuition program. We do community outreach and seminars all across the Commonwealth. And then we do have a loan product available to students and parents if they are looking for some additional funds to help pay for education. I encourage you to follow us on the evaluations that you get. You can add your email. We will give you timely information based on the age of your student. So you can sign up with your email there. We do have a social presence, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We kind of went into the Facebook Live arena this year, and so doing different sessions about that, different college-related topics. We do these seminars. We have webinars as well. So starting in the early fall, we will do a number of webinars on a number of college-related topics. So check those out as well. So our agenda for tonight and what we're going to cover, we're going to start by talking about the types and sources of financial aid. We'll then move into the application process itself. We'll talk a little bit about how financial aid decisions are made. And I say a little bit because it's a little bit different at every school, and so we can kind of talk globally about how they're made, but the individual schools will have their own ways of going about it. We'll talk a little bit about paying for college, and then we'll end with some free resources. We like to do about 45 minutes on this, and so time for questions throughout, and then I'll be hanging around at the end for questions as well, if you have any specific ones to your situation. So let's start by talking about the types and sources of financial aid. Before we do that, what is financial aid? Financial aid is money to help students pay for college. A lot of what we're talking about tonight, I will point out, it doesn't follow this sheet exactly, but a lot of it is captured in this. So this is just a good guide to have as well. So financial aid is money to help students pay for college, simply put. It comes in three main types: grants and scholarships, sometimes referred to as gift aid. That's the good stuff. That's what we don't have to pay back. Comes from a variety of sources, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But grants and scholarships or gift aid, that's the good stuff. The next major source is work study, or the next major type is work study. This is a fund that is granted to students when they apply for financial aid, and it's put right in their financial aid award letter that you will see. And when they get to campus, if they do have this work study, They will find a job on campus or be assigned a job, and they'll work just like any other job would be, and they'll get paid for it. So work study is a what?
Non-taxed.
They will have to pay taxes on it, but it won't. The money that they earned will not impact their financial aid the next year, so it won't be a negative impact on that financially next year. So work study is a fund that when you are applying to schools and you're getting your different award packages, you'll see that some schools will give work study, others will not. And really, again, that's based on the profile of the individual school. So it's a fund that it's called a campus-based fund. Each individual college or university gets a set pool of money, and then they decide kind of who is going to get this money. Not typically a ton of dollars in that, but you can earn up to, say, 500, 1,000, or 1,500 in work study. A lot of students will use this, or families use this as that miscellaneous fund, right? So they're earning throughout the year money in their pocket to pay for books, supplies, whatever comes up throughout the semester. And then the last is student loans, which I know it's probably what you hear the most about. And student loans come from a variety of sources, but the one student loan, or the student loan program that all students are eligible to borrow, is the federal direct student loan. So this is a loan that is lent directly from the federal government. The student is the sole borrower. Parents are not on the note. There is a cap every year that students can receive. It's $5,500 in their first year, goes up to $6,500 in their sophomore year, up to $7,500 for junior and senior year. It comes in two types, or two forms, I guess. Subsidized and an unsubsidized. Subsidized direct loan, the interest does not accrue while the student's enrolled. So when they graduate, they're going to graduate with just that principal balance. So if they borrowed $3,500 and it's subsidized, they graduate 4 years later, they owe $3,500 on that subsidized loan. Unsubsidized, the exact opposite. The interest starts accruing after the full disbursement of the loan. What you will see when you get your financial aid award letters, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is a breakdown or a different amount of the subsidized and unsubsidized loan depending on where you apply. So kind of the normal breakdown, or the max that you can receive in the subsidized portion of the direct loan, is $3,500 in your first year and $2,000 in unsub. So that sure. So the maximum amount that you can receive in a subsidized loan for your first year would be $3,500, $2,000 in the unsub. There's your $5,500. Sophomore year goes up to $4,500 and $2,000. Junior and senior year, $5,500 and $2,000 to equal your $7,500. If the students were to borrow just this loan, max out borrowing the direct loan each year, 55, 65, 75, and 75, they'd graduate with $27,000 in debt and would be a little bit more because of the interest on the unsub. You're looking at about $300 per month for a 10-year repayment plan. So this is a loan that, again, just by the very nature of going to college, students can borrow. There's no credit check required, and it is a loan that helps cover some costs of education. Yes?
Does the
unsubsidized, yes.
The subsidized part, does that accrue interest once they've graduated? So it's interest-free while they're in school?
Right.
Then after
It starts
a
to
month
accrue.
or so, then it starts.
There is a grace period. Once they graduate, interest will start accruing after that. Whereas the unsub, the interest starts accruing once that full loan is dispersed.
The one thing about the unsubsidized loan, while the interest is accruing, every quarter, they're gonna get a bill for that interest. It'll say, amount due $0, interest accrued $34. And it's in their best interest to pay that $34. Because then it goes on top of the loan, now you're paying interest on interest. It's, so they're gonna say you don't have to pay it, but it's in their best interest to pay it every quarter. It's
Right.
not a lot of money, and just get rid of it.
That's a great point. You're technically not required to pay it while the student's enrolled. It's not going to hurt their credit, and nothing bad will happen. The bad thing is that the interest will capitalize, and so once they graduate 4 years later, it's going to be that interest accrued. And so that is a strategy that some families will adopt, is to pay whatever interest accrues on the unsubsidized loan while they're enrolled.
So how do you know which one you'll get?
So when you get those financial aid award letters, those financial aid packages, it will list the different loan, it will list all of the financial aid types that you get from a particular institution, and so the line items will be subsidized and unsubsidized. Now, I said that the normal breakdown is 35 and 2. Depending on the institution that you go to and the cost of attendance, and we'll get into this in a little bit, those numbers might be a little bit different. It comes down to the need of the family. But the two numbers together will always equal $5,500. That's the maximum amount you can borrow. Other questions about the direct loan? Okay. So we start with that and then we come back to the good stuff, right? So let's talk about grants and scholarships, right? Okay, so let's come back here. Grants and scholarships, there's two major types. The first would be merit-based grants or scholarships, and this is awarded based on what it sounds like, students' meritorious achievements in high school, whether it be academic or athletic, recognition of some type of student achievement while they're enrolled in high school. And so when the student applies to college and they go through the admissions process, if the particular college or university offers merit-based awards, once they're accepted to the school, a lot of times they'll get that acceptance letter that says, congratulations, you've been accepted to so-and-so university. As part of your acceptance, the university is offering you $5,000 in a presidential scholarship or $10,000 or whatever it might be. And so if the school does offer or the college does offer merit-based money, that typically comes at the same time that the admissions acceptance comes. Makes sense, right? Congratulations, you've been accepted to this school. Also, as part of this acceptance, you are eligible to receive this award. So I think a really good question as you're going out over the summer, ask the school, if you're asked at a particular university, do you offer merit-based scholarships? Or are they just need-based scholarships? Need-based scholarships are going to be based on the financial need of the family, based on that FAFSA form. So just ask, do you offer merit-based scholarships? They might say yes, they might say no, but it just gives you an idea if they do.
They were talking at college about the merit-based being based upon your SATs, and now the SATs are becoming optional at many schools.
Mm-hmm.
How then are they giving those merit-based scholarships?
So some schools will base their merit-based awarding on SATs. So for the schools that are SAT optional, my assumption is those schools are not using the SATs as a criteria.
I just wondered what they were using.
Yeah, so they might be looking at GPA. They could be looking at the academic record, the transcript of students. It could also be a school that just doesn't do merit awards. But if it is a school that does merit and they're saying nope, SAT optional, then they're probably looking at that transcript as well as maybe some other.
It sounds like it's a new thing that the SATs are becoming optional.
Yeah, more and more colleges are moving that way.
They are, but don't be fooled.
Yeah, and it's this is another great thing to ask while you're on your tours and kind of looking at schools. Is your school SAT optional? Okay, if they are, if I do submit them,
Right.
is it advantageous for me to do? Because some schools are saying we're SAT optional because they don't want to turn students, they don't want that to be a roadblock for students to apply. However, if they knock it out of the park in the SATs, then they should probably still submit it, because even if they're SAT optional doesn't mean that they won't look at it.
The thing about a lot of
Is that fair? Is that fair to say?
is that SATs have been around for a long time. This school's been here for a long time. They have enough data from Blackstone Millville Regional High School for the past 30, 40 years to be able to look at a kid's GPA from this high school and make an assumption on his GPA or her GPA and what their SAT would be based on the averages from every student that's ever applied and gone to that school. So they have so much data that they're saying their SAT option is the politically in thing to do. They still have that information in a estimated guess kind of way. They rate, every admissions office rates every high school in America based upon the students that we send to them. So if a student goes there and withdraws, that hurts this school in regards to the value this school comes to the colleges with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So that's on the merit-based side. So again, not every institution will award these. We'll have, to give you an example, when I was working at WPI, we did, as an institution, both need-based scholarships, so based on, again, the financial need of the family. We also did merit-based awards as well. And so that was based on a number of factors, one of them being, rank in class, SATs, kind of what their academic record was.
Can you get both the merit and need?
You can. Yes, good question. So that's on the merit-based side. Now, need-based aid, it captures, it's a much larger category. So part of need-based aid is those grants and scholarships that we talked about. So college and universities, when they're reviewing families for need-based money, they'll be looking at that FAFSA form that you submit. And so as part of kind of the larger category of need-based aid, there's going to be need-based grants and scholarships, which is good. There's going to be need-based loans, which would be the subsidized portion of those direct loans that we talked about, and then work study. So work study technically is a need-based fund that would be awarded to students, again, based on the information that they're putting on the FAFSA. Most financial aid is need-based, so kind of in the general, if we were to capture it all, most financial aid is need-based, although we are seeing a trend that more schools are awarding more on the merit-based side. Some schools use it as a recruitment tool. If they are trying to get students in, maybe their expected family contribution or the need of the family is not significant, then a merit-based award could be a recruitment tool to get a student in. So just good questions to ask. Do you offer need-based scholarships? Mostly everyone will say yes. Do you offer merit-based scholarships when you're kind of going on your college tours? And looking through the websites as well. It should be listed there.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Something that came to me the other day was, we talk about scholarships, we talk about grants. They're both money that doesn't have to be paid back, but you use them, but the words seem to be used separately.
Yeah.
Or almost interchangeably. Are they really truly interchangeable, or is there a difference?
So they are most of the time interchangeable. Some schools will choose to say any of their merit-based money, they'll just call them scholarships, and any need-based money would be grants. But it doesn't always work that way. On the federal side, kind of the biggest because it's a good segue, but this is a perfect segue. So there's a lot of different sources where financial aid comes from in addition to the school, but one source that it comes from is the federal government. So in addition to that loan, there's one big grant program called the Pell Grant. So in that case, grant is associated with a need-based fund. So it's kind of used interchangeably. There's no real exact, yes, scholarship always means this and grant always means that.
I didn't know whether one was going to require them to continue to get certain grades, while the other one might be, you get this money regardless. As long as you're here, you get that money.
Right. Most, that's a good question. So most financial aid is tied to some type of academic progress. Most of it's satisfactory academic progress, which out of school or college might be maintaining a 2.0 GPA. Depending on the school, most you'll have to be enrolled at least half time. And so it is tied usually to something, whether it's a grant or a scholarship. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Good question. So let's talk, and this that was actually a very good segue. So when we talk about sources of financial aid, the federal government is one source of financial aid. So again, they've got grants, work study, loans. There's also tax incentives. You're not going to see that in your financial aid award, but that's kind of something later on. As I mentioned, the biggest grant through the federal government is the federal Pell Grant. That's a need-based grant. It's directly tied to that FAFSA form that you complete and that expected family contribution, which we'll talk about. Yep. It's the next slide. Yeah. So we're gonna pop right into that next slide, and we'll kind of, it's gonna circle right back around. Massachusetts, there are grants, scholarships, tuitions. There's also loans to the state of Massachusetts. They're few and far between. But again, so financial aid through the federal government, through the state. a lot of money is coming from the college or university. And so this is going to be directly from those colleges and universities that you apply to, in particular private colleges and universities. If you are applying to those, they're going to have grant or scholarship dollars. And then other agencies, outside agencies, private scholarships. So I'm sure you've started to hear about this, but private outside scholarships are another way to fund education. We would see consistently students come in with $500 from this outside agency, $1,000, $1,500 here, and all of that money is used to help cover some costs of the education. So as your students are doing everything else in their life next year, one of the things that they're going to be looking at are those private outside scholarships to apply for and help defray some of the costs. So before we get into the form, just a little bit about the breakdown of where financial aid comes from. So this is from the 2016-17 year. College Board does a trends in student aid every year. You can see that unfortunately most of the financial aid is through federal student loans. Right behind it, institutional grants and scholarships and federal grants. So at least the next two biggest buckets are in those grants and scholarships that are either coming from the institution or from the federal government. So questions about kind of general sources and types of financial aid? And again, a lot of what we discuss right now is right in that packet right there. And you're going to hear this multiple times. I know for some of you this is the first time, and so you'll hear this kind of a bunch of times. But hopefully this is a good kind of appetizer and giving you just a little bit of knowledge as you're starting to explore this. So other questions? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the process. The timelines are important, as are most things in life. So understanding what those timelines are. When you are, this summer, so you'll probably be developing your college list, right? Kind of looking at which schools you want to apply to, which ones you might even visit, etc. We always suggest having some type of system, whether it's, you just write it down. I'm sure there's an app out there. We've got a PDF, fillable PDF that you can do. Having something out there where you're writing the college name, the cost, put the cost there, where it is, kind of everything, when's the admissions deadline, when's the financial aid deadline, what forms are required. So just having some type of system where it's all in one place.
And your kids have Naviance, and
thank you.
their smartphone, there's an app, or they go to the website and log in, and that tool is right there for them.
Thank you.
And everything is, like the date, the phone number, the directions, everything is right there in Naviance.
Good.
And it's a family, just so you know, it's a family site. It's not a kid, it's not student only. It says student/family. So we expect that you should have that password. It's charges 123, and you can get into it as well.
What's
Good.
the password you say?
Charges 123 is the password, unless your daughter or son has changed it.
Yeah, good. And Naviance is great. It's very
It's getting
user-friendly.
better. They're actually improving it this summer for more career stuff.
Good. So very user-friendly. So yeah, definitely use that. Timelines are important though, and so as you're going through the process, you'll be doing admissions applications. Probably be doing that first or exploring that first. The good news about the financial aid forms is that they now are available a lot earlier. So in regards to the financial aid forms, there's really two major forms. The first one that all colleges and universities require to be considered for financial aid is the FAFSA form. I'm sure many of you have heard of this form, even if you've never done one. It's the free application for federal student aid. FAFSA.gov is the website that you're going to want to go to. It's required by all colleges and universities. It becomes available October 1st. It used to be later, but now it is available October 1st. FAFSA.gov is the place to go. On this form, we'll talk about a little bit what is asked for on this form, but this is the form that colleges use, the primary form that colleges use to review the families for financial aid. As I mentioned, it's available October 1st. When you complete the FAFSA, something new that's happened in the past recent few years, so you'll be completing, it'll become live October 1st, 2019, and you'll be completing for the 2021 academic year. When you go through and complete the FAFSA form, it's going to be asking you to use 2018 tax data, so the taxes that we're doing right now. what's called prior year. So hopefully your information will be done, your taxes will be complete. It's a little wonky because you're do your taxes right now. Hopefully everyone submitted them. Unless you got an extension, that's fine. But come October 1st, you're going to be using, when you complete that form, you're going to be using 2018 tax information when it goes through and asks for all the financial information, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Make sure that when you go to FAFSA, you go to FAFSA.gov. There are replicable sites that are .com and .org that are not FAFSA, and they look a lot like that, but you'll be giving your private information to an unknown source.
Yes. Yeah, and the FAFSA's done a good job at FAFSA.com, I think redirects now, but yeah, FAFSA.gov, you should not be paying for this. It's a free form. It's something that needs to be completed every year. The timelines are a little bit different when they're an upperclassman, but just so you know, it does become available October 1st. In order to log in and sign, you will need an FSA ID. Both you and your student will need that FSA ID. So we have a link there of where you can go to get that. I would encourage you to do that beforehand. It's your electronic signature. It's the way that you kind of get in and sign, and it's something that you'll use every year. We have, and we'll be updating these webinar recordings with anything that might change for the next year. But we do have webinar recordings that does a deep dive into the FAFSA form. We actually go line by line through every single question. So if you want something that's really riveting, you can go out and you can watch us go through every line. It's not too bad. You can go through and we'll actually go through every line and kind of talk about what specifically you should be inputting here. And so that's available on our events page.
You have, I believe, several months to complete that form.
Yes.
So from October 1st until whenever, but are you penalized for being one of the last people to fill it in? Are you more apt to get more financial aid if you fill it out on October 1st as opposed to January 31st?
Right, so that's a great question. So from the federal aid side, so if you're eligible for those loans or those grants, as long as you complete the form, you're not going to be penalized. You're still going to be eligible to receive any money that you may have been eligible to receive. The institutional side, it's a bit tricky of an answer. A lot of schools are moving to early action on the admissions side. And so it's, it used to be this regular decision process. You'd apply by February 1st, and everyone would kind of do that. More and more schools are moving to what's called early action, which is where the deadline to submit for admission might be November 1st, November 15th, etc. And so if you are considering some schools applying early action, I would try to get all of your financial aid forms in as well early. Because what happens at institutions is when they're reviewing students for admission, they're accepted for admission, there's I would say, limited number of funds. Again, this is primarily private colleges and universities that are awarding their own money. Limited number of funds that they might award to the incoming class. And so if you are applying early action, if you're going through that admissions process, I would encourage you to get those forms in early as well. So do that FAFSA. You don't have to do it October 1st, right? But you don't. The site's usually down to October 1st. It's like a big joke. It usually crashes October 1st. It's pretty terrible, right? I mean, it's usually down, and then the thing goes out to. It usually, sometimes it happens past few years. So
honestly, I think they have a link now to the IRS that you hit it, and it brings all of your stuff in for you. It's really become so easy to do, and it's worth doing it because you have to remember the institution your student's going to. There are sophomores, juniors, and seniors that attend that school already that are getting their piece of the pie, and you're coming in new, so you want to make sure you got it in there to get it, And then questions to ask the schools is, okay, you give me money my freshman year, you gonna show up sophomore year too? Because I got to pay for 3 years, You don't want it to disappear,
Yeah, so that's definitely a good question as well. We have a really good resource on our site, 9 questions to ask the financial aid office. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that too as you're going on your tours. And one of them is, what's your renewal policy with grants and scholarships with financial aid?
It's really important you bring your kids into this conversation.
Yes.
Because once they turn 18 on a college campus, they will not speak to you. They're 18 years old. And I don't mean to be funny or mean, but when I went to college, I showed up and said, my mom told me to come here, and she said, well, you go tell your mommy to tell you what you're here for, because I ain't talking to her, I'm talking to you. And I was embarrassed, but it's true. They're 18, they won't talk to you.
Right.
They'll only talk to them. Even if you're paying 100% of it, they'll only talk to the student.
Right.
So it's important that they're educated about the terminology, the
And-
words, you know?
And it's advantageous too, especially from that loan side, right? Because if they are borrowing the direct loan, they are the only borrower on that loan. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's reported on the FAFSA. This is not the only things that are reported on the FAFSA, but these are kind of the major buckets. So student citizenship status, colleges where student is applying. So every school has a federal code, and so when you're completing the FAFSA, enter in that information. That way, when you complete the FAFSA, the schools get that data. They get that information. If you don't know the school's code, that's okay. You can do a school lookup when you're completing the form. So colleges where student is applying. Parent and student data. On the parent side, who is reported or who is completing the FAFSA form. So if parents are married, including same-sex parents, all parents who live together, married or not, and if the parent's situation is divorced or separated, it's going to be the custodial parent and the current spouse who is reporting their information. Now, how do you determine who the custodial parent is? It's going to be the parent with which the student lived with most over the past 12 months. If that's split right down the middle, then it's going to be the student, or excuse me, it's going to be the parent who provided most financial support to the student in the past 12 months. If that's split down the middle, which I doubt it is, but if those are right down the middle, 50-50, then you pick a parent to be the custodial parent. That is the guidance. And all of this, again, is on that FAFSA form as well, so when you're going through and you're completing that. But that's kind of who the parents are when we complete the FAFSA form. For income, it's, again, for the 2021 FAFSA, it's going to be looking at 2018 income information. So the idea behind doing it 2 years back, prior year, you're completing October 1st, hopefully your taxes are done so no one's estimating what their figures are. So that's kind of the idea of why it was moved earlier. Both taxed and untaxed information will be reported on that. On the asset side, you're going to include your savings, checking, investments, and or other properties. You're also going to include all 529 accounts as a parent asset. So when you go through and complete the FAFSA form, it will make more sense as you're going through. There's a section for parent information and student information, both on the demographic side and the financial side. So when you're going through on the asset side, this information is reported for both students and parents. So again, current value of savings, checking, investments, all 529 counts as a parental asset. So if you have multiple 529 accounts, both for this son or daughter going to school, but let's say you have one for another son or daughter, you need to report the market value or the current value as of the day you complete the FAFSA. Things not to include, which sometimes folks will, especially if you're doing the first time, do not include your primary home value, do not include the value of retirement, do not include life insurance, and do not include the value of a small family business if it's under 100 employees. So things not to include. A lot of people will think that they need to report the value of their primary home. They do not on the FAFSA. Some will put their retirement in as well under an asset. You do not need to report that. If you've got this, it's all right. When you go through and complete the FAFSA, it's kind of listed all there of what to complete or what to include. And then the last thing you list, well, not the last thing, but another major piece is the number of folks in the household and the number of children attending college. So if it's mom and dad, younger sibling, and one going to college in 2021, put 4 in the household, 1 in college.
When you said the 529s, if you hold more than one 529, if you have two kids, you have to include the total value
Mm-hmm.
for both,
For both.
even if they have separate accounts, and even if one is not going to college right then and there,
Mm-hmm.
because he's younger.
Yeah. So you do, now, here's the good news about the assets. In the formula, there's protections built in. So you're putting all this information in. If you say the value of the 529s is 10,000, they're not going to say all that 10,000 is now part of your contribution. It doesn't do that. There's a whole formula behind it. There's protections built in, and basically at the end of the calculations, it's really looking at about 5 to 5.5% of parental assets are going to go towards that full contribution. So again, there's protections built in. It's not a ton, But yeah, you do have to report the value of all 529s. Was there a question?
And I wasn't sure, can you still fill it out even if you don't know when your child's going to college?
Yes. So you can complete the FAFSA even if you don't know where they're going. If they have an idea, like oh, maybe I think I might go here, you could put in that college where the student is applying, you could put in that college. If they don't end up going there, it's okay. Schools get hundreds of FAFSAs every year and the student doesn't end up going. But you could do the FAFSA on October 1st. You could do it early. You can log back in once they have their list and update just that college where the students is applying section. And then once you do that, all the schools will get transcripts of your information.
I also have a daughter, she's in graduate school, so does that,
She doesn't count.
okay.
Unfortunately not. Yeah, parents in college do not count and grad students don't, sadly.
Can't talk to it first.
Other questions? So again, this isn't everything that's included. That would be a whole session. We have a webinar, as I mentioned, if you want to go through, and we will go through kind of every major section of the FAFSA, kind of break it down if you want to look. There's a recorded one up there now, and we'll do another one typically in the fall timeframe for any changes that might happen with the FAFSA. So that's the FAFSA form. That's kind of the major form that you need to complete. The other financial aid form that you might run into, especially if you're applying to a private college or university, is called the CSS profile. So this is administered through the College Board. There is a fee associated with this form. As I mentioned, it's primarily or almost exclusively private colleges and universities use this form, although not every private college and university will require this. So when you are, another great question to ask, you're going on the tours from the financial aid side, you don't have to ask if they require the FAFSA, because they all do, but ask if you're at a private college, do you require the CSS profile? And so that'd be a good question to know. And again, you have that spreadsheet. Now you know which schools require the CSS profile. The CSS profile is a little longer. There's a few more questions that are going to be asked on this form. You can still fill it out electronically, and that's kind of the preferred method. Choose which schools it's going to. But there are a little more questions that kind of come along with this. It's going to dive a little bit deeper into your financial situation. Why schools use this, why private colleges and universities use this, is that a lot of their funding dollars from both need-based, well, on the need-based side, is coming from their endowments. And so they want a more rounded, well-rounded picture of the financial situation of the family. And so they're kind of using this form to determine eligibility for any grants, scholarships, need-based scholarship from the institution. Again, CSS profile doesn't really impact your eligibility from the federal standpoint, but any of those institutional dollars, which is why, again, private colleges and universities will use it. So the school should be clearly upfront with, okay, yes, we require both the FAFSA form and the CSS profile. It too is available October 1st. So they moved that open date up a little bit. All right, who's got a headache? Okay, all right, so that's okay. You should have one if this is the first time you're hearing it. But here's the important thing to know. FAFSA form, October 1st, CSS profile, October 1st, as you're going on these tours and you're talking to schools, having that list saying which forms do you require. And kind of when you get in there and go through, it'll make more sense as you're completing the form, hopefully. So after you apply, the colleges and the state of Massachusetts receive the data electronically. The colleges that you indicate on the FAFSA form and profile get that information. The state receives it to check your eligibility for any state grant dollars. Students will receive what's called a student aid report, or a SAR, by email or mail, mostly by email. Check that. That's basically a transcript of what you put on the FAFSA form. An extra zero here or there could obviously have an impact on your financial need of the family, and so your numbers and how they shake out. So you'll do these forms. Again, it's kind of happening, the process is happening simultaneously. You're applying to schools in the November, December, maybe October timeframe. You're doing your financial aid forms at the same time. You will not receive a financial aid package until you're accepted to the school. So typically how it happens is, let's say your college list is 7, you apply to 7, you get into 5, you're gonna get a financial aid package from those 5 schools. The other 2 aren't gonna give you one because you weren't accepted. Makes sense. So usually how it happens is you go, you're accepted to the school, they send, yeah, you've been accepted for admission. You can expect your financial aid package in a few weeks as long as all of your information is submitted. So that's kind of how the process goes. So these happen in concert with one another, and they're happening kind of on an overlapping process.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
That package that they send is going to include absolutely everything that you're eligible for, or is the federal government going to send you something separately from what they're going to send you?
Great question. So it's going to include all that you're eligible for from all of the different sources, both state, federal government, and the institution. The only exception would be any outside scholarships that your son or daughter is applying to kind of on their own. But yeah, good question. This is kind of later on, but contacting that financial aid office with any special circumstances, so kind of an unintended consequence. You're putting 2018 data in, 2018 financial data. Well, 2019 could look very different from a financial standpoint. So if it does, you want to contact the office and say, hey, I had to put in 2018 data, but my 2019 situation looks a little different, job loss, reduction in hours, whatever it might be. So things like that. So if special circumstances, contact the financial aid office. Colleges may request verification documents. This happens a little later. Verification is a process which they compare the tax returns to what you submit on the FAFSA, just to make sure that everything works. And so again, that's something that will happen later on. Questions about what happens after you apply, or the 2 major forms that you have to complete. All right, so we've got the different sources of aid and kind of where it comes from. We've got the different forms. Again, the FAFSA form and the CSS profile, the 2 big ones. So let's talk a little bit about how financial aid decisions are made. And again, this is kind of the global formula, but it's going to be a little bit different at each institution. So where it all starts with every school is that cost of attendance. So cost of attendance is the total cost of attending a particular college or university for 1 year. So included in the cost of attendance, those total expenses for 1 year, are going to be tuition and fees. So that's a big line item, tuition and fees, as well as room and board, which can also be a significant line item depending on where you're applying to. So we call these billable or direct expenses because, again, you're billed directly for these expenses. So for simplicity, let's say tuition and fees is $20,000, room and board is $10,000, $30,000 for the year. You'd be billed $15,000 in the fall, $15,000 in the spring. Also included in the cost of attendance are what we call non-billed or indirect expenses. So these are built into the cost of attendance. Think of the cost of attendance as the student budget, simply because students do and families do have to incur some costs associated with buying some of these, or it kind of works into the expenses of going to school. So books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses are kind of 3 major categories that are all worked into this cost of attendance. So all of these different buckets together kind of capture the entire cost of attendance. From there, so it starts with that cost of attendance, and what's subtracted from that cost of attendance is what we call this expected family contribution. So this is the number, let's go back to the FAFSA, you put in all that financial information, you put in how big your household is, you put in all the students, whatever it is, kind of goes through. I can't give you the exact kind of, what it's gonna look like in your EFC, but you go through and based on your financial information, your asset information, the household size, the FAFSA is gonna determine what's called your expected family contribution, which is your amount the family has to, the ability to absorb for 1 year of college. That number is what's used by every single college and university to determine your financial aid. So I'm going to come back to that because I don't really like that. But if you kind of think about the formula every school is using, it starts with that cost of attendance, which is going to be different at every school, but your expected family contribution is going to be the at every single school because that stays with you. You do that FAFSA form once, it goes to every single school. So if you take that cost of attendance, you subtract that expected family contribution, what you're left with is financial aid eligibility, and then this is where colleges fill in your financial aid using this eligibility and from various sources that we talked about earlier. So to give you an example of, and I apologize for going through quickly, but I think this graph kind of shows it better than perhaps I can explain it. But if you go through and you think about why your financial aid awards might be different from each institution, there's a lot of different reasons. But one of them is that every school is going to have a different cost of attendance, right? And so the chart we have here, College A, as you can see, that cost of attendance, that tuition fees, room and board, all those other indirect expenses is $70,000. So if your expected family contribution is $10,000, if you do the 70 minus 10, you have more financial aid eligibility, $60,000. Whereas if you go down to College D, well, College D, let's say it's a community college, might only cost $10,000. So when you subtract 10, really you don't have any financial eligibility. So that's kind of why when I think one of the most striking things and something, from being on the other side and kind of hearing it and talking with a lot of families is that, they'll get different financial aid packages and they're totally different, right? And you're like, well, what's going on here? My EFC is the same. Well, it really kind of comes down to one of the reasons is that cost of attendance because every single school is going to have a different cost of attendance.
Plus private versus public.
Plus private versus public. And I mean, that's not the only reason. There's a whole host of things. That's why, again, this isn't an exact science, but there's other things that go into the formula. Does the school offer merit versus need-based scholarship? Is the school looking to recruit a certain type of class that might go into it? Where is the school located and what type of profile of students are they looking to build? How much money do they have to spend from kind of the endowment to recruit a class in? So all of those things are going to come in, but kind of the general formula, if you think about it, starts with that cost of attendance, subtract that EFC, and that's the financial aid eligibility is the difference. So just to kind of circle it back, we talked about that direct loan earlier, the $3,500 and the $2,000 in the unsub. Anyone remember that? You remembered it? Yep, so $3,502. If you went to College D, because the cost of attendance is $10,000 and your EFC is $10,000, you wouldn't get any subsidized loan. All of the subsidized loan would be an unsub, so you'd be eligible to borrow $5,500. Now, you don't have to borrow the loans, but that's kind of why, again, even the loans will look a little different when you get those financial aid packages. Questions? Yes?
So if you have a student who could not really even consider a $70,000 a year school, would you encourage them to apply anyway because their eligibility for the
Yes.
aid would still be there?
Absolutely. And in fact, what you might find and what you might see is that depending on the institution and depending on, again, their endowment, how much they're looking to spend, you may, and a lot of times this happens, we're consistently seeing this, you're going to apply to schools that have a higher sticker price equals cost of attendance, but because they can give more in money, in grants and scholarships, when it comes down to the net price, how much you're actually going to pay out of pocket, that more expensive school might be less expensive than the school with the smaller sticker price. Because if you think about state schools, most, some are starting to give small scholarships. I know Worcester State's doing a little bit here and there, but most don't have scholarship dollars to give. And so if you apply to a school that costs $50,000, their cost of attendance is $50,000, your EFC is, well, let's just use this example. If you apply to a school that costs $40,000 and your EFC is $5,000, well, if they give you a lot in grants and scholarships, then it could end up being less expensive than a school that sticker price is $20,000, but they don't give you any grants and scholarships. So that's kind of, we say that don't be discouraged by that sticker price necessarily. It's only be mindful of the net price after you get those financial aid award
I
letters.
always tell a quick story. My first year as a guidance counselor in Revere, I had a student, her dream was to go to Boston College,
Yeah.
and she wasn't going to apply because her mom was a single mom who ran a laundromat. So she was gonna apply just to Salem State. And I said to her, you need to apply to BC if it's your dream. Because if you can't afford it at the end of the day and you get in, you can go to Salem State with your head held high and be proud that you got into BC. But who knows what could happen with financial aid? Because we all think Salem State schools are cheaper. Got the financial aid, she would have to pay $5,000 to go to Salem State, and she got a free ride to Boston College. So that's why I always tell kids, let them shut the door. You shut the door on them. Don't let them shut it on you.
Agreed.
You get in, hold your head up high. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. That's okay. But you got
Right.
in. So I always encourage, don't let the sticker price. But be honest when it comes to the end of the day, paying for it.
Right,
You
right.
know, don't let them talk you into a lot of debt because they left ivy on the walls.
Right.
I'll get you an ivy plant.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so very few folks end up paying this. Well, some pay the sticker price, but that's another question. Not sorry. Some do pay the sticker price, but very few end up paying whatever that published or that cost is. Yeah. So this is our, and I'm going to go through because I do want to make sure we have time for questions. But this is people either love or hate this slide. I tend to like it. So this is our financial. This is the barrel. This is the barrel slide, as you can see. So it kind of conceptualizes a lot of what we've talked about. But again, this school cost of attendance $40,000. So right at the bottom of the barrel, your expected family contribution. Okay, so that starts right at the bottom. COA minus EFC. Your financial eligibility at this school is $35,000. The difference. So this school gives you we'll call this one a merit-based scholarship of $9,500. Pretty good. So far, only free money. They also give you a grant. Let's say it's a need-based grant, $15,500. All right, we're good. So this is kind of filling up the barrel with free money. This is a good thing. Student loan, this should say $5,500, but work with me here. So student loan of $3,500 goes on top of that. Work study of $3,500, that's super high. It would probably be less than that. If you're a quick add, you will notice that the 5, the 9,500, the 50, the 15,500, the 3,500, and 3,500 doesn't equal 40. Doesn't add up. So what happens most of the time is that in addition to the expected family contribution, on the top of the barrel, there's also this other difference called unmet need. And so many colleges and universities, after all of their financial aid is awarded, you're going to be responsible not only for the expected family contribution portion, but also whatever the difference is between the cost of attendance and whatever financial aid you received. So, some schools will fill this whole. All of them will try.
It's the only Harvard, like the biggest endowment on planet Earth, will, because they have an ego.
Harvard-
If you say I can't afford it, they'll find you money.
Harvard, BC,
Yeah.
Amherst, College of the Holy Cross. Though I'm sure you saw
But
that
most
article
of them-
recently.
You have unmet need.
Yeah, so I think there's schools that are, again, this is going to be most of the scenarios where in addition to what you're paying from your expected family contribution, there's also that unmet need on top.
And remember, divide that by 2, because you only have to pay it per semester.
point. Yes.
So you're looking at the big price. It's for the year, but you only have to pay it by semester.
That's a great
And
point.
they will do a payment plan for you so that it's not so cumbersome.
That's a good point. We get this question a lot, so we put it in just to kind of show you what the asset impact on expected family contribution would be. Again, that EFC is that number that's kind of spits out or calculated once you complete the FAFSA. So this is just an example. If you look at 4 in the family and 1 child in college, you can see here that family A, B, and C, the combined parent income is the same in each scenario. The major difference here is the kind of difference in assets, combined parent assets. Holding everything else equal, 4 and 1, and building some assumptions in here, you can see kind of the impact on that expected family contribution by having more in assets in the bank. So if you go from 0 to 75, you can see that the net yield is 2,700, 2,758 on your EFC, how it goes up and up to 150 as well. So again, there is an impact. Having more money in the bank saved will make your EFC go up, but it's not as large of a difference as the income. So on the income side, the expected family contribution, that FAFSA formula really is an income-driven formula. So you can see kind of a reverse example now. Assets are all the same, but you can see kind of the combined parent income goes up from 75 to 100,000 to 150, and you can see kind of the difference in that EFC.
So you don't have to go pull money out of your bank and put it in your mattress. It ain't gonna be much of a difference.
It's not gonna be much of a difference, right? It's on the income side. Now people always ask, like, well, should I just quit my job? No, you should not quit your job because it's using 2018 data now, so it wouldn't work. But don't quit your job because even at the end of the day, if that family, if the income was zero or much less, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get full financial aid because of that unmet need that we talked about. So don't quit your jobs. Not that any of you would. And so, you'll see this, and it will be a little more clear when you get this, but when you get those award letters, the totals will vary, even if the cost of attendance is the same. So the example of the bar chart we showed earlier, the cost of attendance was different. But in this example, you can see college A, B, and C have the same cost of attendance. They all cost $40,000. And again, that EFC travels with you, so it's $5,000. So your eligibility is the same at each school, but this is kind of where the not exact science comes into it. College A, B, and C, clearly college A is the best option from a financial standpoint. Now, of course, your sons and daughters will want to go to college C because they offer the least amount of grants and scholarships, but hopefully that's not the case. But you can see kind of college A is offering, in this case, the best from the free money standpoint. So totals can vary, and then also types can vary as well. So again, same example, just looking at cost of attendance of 40,000, EFC of 5, 3 different colleges. If you just looked at the bottom, you could see that you technically have an unmet need of 3,000 from each school. So if you just looked at the bottom, you'd be like, oh, this is all the same, 3,000 from each school. Clearly not. If you were to kind of dive a little deeper into the types of awards, College C isn't even offering any grants and scholarships, and they're saying a parent loan of $26,500. So when you're looking at the schools, obviously you're looking at not only what it costs, and when you get those award letters, the different types of it, but also looking at kind of what is that net out to. Because even if it's the same net, it could look very, very different. Award letters don't look like this, unfortunately. That's something else as you're going through, you'll kind of see kind of the differences. And so again, kind of having that system to sit down and do a comparison. We have in the spring, so next year, we do regional seminars called After the College Acceptance, where we actually will sit down with families and we do a little bit of a deeper dive into the financial aid packages. We also do a webinar about this, where we kind of talk through the different financial aid and kind of how you're making sure you're doing an apples to apples comparison. All right, so I'm at my time. Questions about this, I think I'll show, but questions, because I want to be mindful of everyone's time here. I'm a little past 7.
Is there, since most of us have our 18 numbers already done, is there
Yeah.
any way to get an estimate of what your estimated family contribution may be?
Yeah, so there's a couple places you can do. You can go. The bigfuture.collegeboard.org has a great one. There's also FAFSA Forecaster, which will give you an idea of what you're looking at from that expected family contribution
I believe
side.
most financial aid office websites at most colleges will have a calculator.
Yes.
Right, as a matter of fact, it might even be federal law now.
Yes,
that
thank
they
you.
have to have a financial aid calculator on their website for your use.
Thank you.
That's federal law, actually.
I did actually skip this. Yes, so it's called the net price calculator. So there is a tool on each individual college and university's website that you can go. The accuracy of it is based on how much input it asks for. But the idea behind the net price calculator was that it will give you an idea of what you might receive in financial aid from the particular college or university based on, again, those inputs, your financial input. It might ask for some academic inputs of your student or child. a bit of caution on the net price calculator. If you do the calculator and it says that you're going to get a full ride, and then you apply to the school and you don't get a full ride, you can't go in with the estimate and say, on the other hand, if it says you're going to get no money, don't let that be a reason to not apply, because when you go through that actual process, if the inputs, and there's data behind the net price calculator, so if it's using old tables and old formulas, it might not truly reflect what's going to happen in the future. But I think it's a very good tool at least to have.
I think your best tool though is MIFA. It's a state-run agency. Our taxpayer money pays for it. They're personed weekdays from 8 to 5, and they have the answers to every financial aid question. They do it for a living. So whenever a parent calls me, I always say, call me, because I do not want to guide you down a path that I'm not really 100% sure about. They know what they're talking about, and you can call them. They have an 800 number, and your taxpayers are paying for it. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, so I would, we do have folks who answer phones, in addition to the webinars that we do and call support, so emails, any way you want to get in touch with us, social. I'll end with free resources. FAFSA, we do these. Is there one around here?
We used to participate in FAFSA Day, but it was
Okay. So there are
FAFSA days in the fall throughout the state at various high schools that you can sign up, and they have volunteers and financial officers that go into the schools and help you walk through it. But quite honestly, this process has become so easy that you can really go to a YouTube video and they'll walk you through it. So not for nothing, but like, I'm a Patriots fan, and I do not want to miss a Patriots game for coming up here to sit here for 4 people.
Right.
YouTube has great videos, MEF has great videos. They'll walk you through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do have the videos, but if you are interested, there are various ones throughout the state. I'll point to the scholarships. This would be something that your sons or daughters are kind of diving a little deeper into. Looking at those private outside scholarships, where can you get that? I know Naviance has.
We use FastWeb. We encourage FastWeb. FastWeb is like College Board. It's a website. You create a profile of yourself as a student, and then when any scholarship hits their database and it matches to your profile, they'll send you an email, and you click it, and the scholarship application is right there. You fill it out, but you have to be careful, because the email comes in and says that this is a 99% match to you, and you're like, oh, awesome, it's great, I'm gonna fill it out. And then you realize that 1% is they're looking for a black boy and you're a white girl. So that 1% may be a big difference,
Right.
So you still have to be careful.
Yeah.
But at least you can sit back and let it come to you, rather than the olden days of going to the Boston Public Library and going through books that are all
Right.
dusty.
Yeah, definitely a lot of web resources to take advantage of. And, I'll just end with, I hope you do complete the evaluations, but please put your emails on there. We will give you information. It's timely. It's related to the age of your son or daughter, which is why we ask, and we put you in our email stream, and you'll get periodic emails throughout the year. Peter mentioned the webinars that we have, on-call support. You can reach out to us at any time. And I have some cards up here, so I will leave them as well. This is a very good, I think, reference to have. This PowerPoint's online, so everything that we do.
And we from the school counseling team are going to start this year with your kids. We're going to do videos showing you and them, because we're going to send it to parents as well. Well, like for Naviance example, I'm going to go in, I'm going to open my computer, and I'm going to record how to log into Naviance, where to go to get what you need, and it's a video that you can have. You play when you want, you hit rewind. I'll do the same thing this summer for the Common App. So as we go through this stage, rather than having a junior parent night where we throw all this information with you, we'll just make short videos so that you have the information, explaining early decision, explaining early action, explaining all this stuff. And if it raises questions, then you can get a hold of us. But we're gonna make a video library, so to speak.
Good. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. And if you have any other questions, I'll be up here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.